Okay, good afternoon and welcome to Shulchan Aruch Yomi. Today's Siman is Siman Lamed Gimel 33. Thank God Siman Lamed Beis is in the rearview mirror. I did 52 halachas yesterday in one share, 47 minutes. That means I did less than a halacha a minute. It's pretty good. 47 minutes. If you missed yesterday's share, it is on YouTube. Go check it out. See how I went through 52 seifim. I don't think anyone can go through 52 seifim faster than what I did. So today we have a privilege of only having 5 seifim, only 5 halachas. Din tikune tefillin v'din aretzuos. If your tefillin got ripped, right? Sometimes I'd never seen this, that actually tefillin got ripped. They're pretty cheap quality tefillin, but let's say they do get ripped, and we're going to learn about the retzuos, the straps being black. Aleph. Orach shel shnei batim b'batei arosh zeitzel zeh, right? In your shel rosh, you have 4 bottom. You have little 4 compartments, right? If there was a rip in 2 of the bottom, right, the ones next to each other, you might tefillin yeshanim. If they're old tefillin, psulim, they're puzzle because it's a siman that the or it used to be strong and now it's a weak or. It's niskalkel, right? The imheim chadashim ksherim. If they're new tefillin, they're ksherim. Kol zman she'or moshev abatim chaim. As long as the bottom, the titura, as long as the titura is in place, it's not ripped. So if the rips are not next to each other in the bottom, it's kosher. The shel yad, the Mishnah Berurah says, because it's only one bias, if it's ripped at all, it's already puzzle. Hagad, the Ramah says, gama batim srich liyot kayamim el shenikru ksas. Right? Even when they're ripped, it has to be that it's discernible as a compartment. If it's not discernible as a compartment, then it's for even one apostles. The Ramah brings us another shita, which says exactly the opposite. Yeshanim ksherim. When you have 2 rips, it's kosher by old ones, right? Because it took them a long time to rip. But if it's new pair of tefillin and it has 2 rips, that shows that the or to begin with wasn't any good. The Ramah says, too bad, we don't know which one are chadashim, which one are yeshanim. So both by chadashim, both by yeshanim, you have to throw them out. You can't use them. Elohim chadashim. Shulchan Aruch says, what's chadashim, what's new? Let's say, right, you have through the mabarta, you have the retzuos coming through. So if you were to stretch the retzuos, and it would cause the leather to be ripped. If it's not, doesn't open, right? It's called yashan. It's called all of them. But like we said, there's a heter, which doesn't apply really. It's machmer both ways. But if you want to be mekel and you want to follow either the Shulchan Aruch, the Svardim, the Shulchan Aruch, or the Ramah, could be mekel by the Yeshanim. That's only that needs 2 not next to each other. In this calculus times, like the first and third bias are kosher. I feel Yeshanim, even if they're old. That's in this calculus. If 3 of the compartments are ripped, doesn't matter if they're next to each other, not next to each other. Of course, you're going to have next to each other anyway, but then it's puzzle according to everybody, whether they're Yeshanim, whether they're Chadashim. Let's say the stitchings, right? You have to stitch the tefillin with the gidim, with the sinews, the l'chadchila. If you don't have sinews, at least use cloth. If 2 of the stitches were next to each other, they ripped. Or you're supposed to have 12 stitches. If 3 of those stitches broke, even if they're not next to each other, that's only talking about old ones. Right? The chadashim, new ones, this is the Shulchan Aruch's opinion, as long as they're new, so as long as the Torah, that's the way of measuring, the Torah is still around, still intact, then they're considered chadashim, and they're kosher. Chadashim, another way of measuring it, what's considered a new pair of tefillin, if you would hang the tefillin, you take a piece of the leather and you'd hang it by the tefer, you take part of the leather, and you hang the leather on, I don't know, a screw or something like that. It's not going to break. If you attach it to the wall on a screw, and the leather would snap, so they're considered old. And according to the Shulchan Aruch, it's possible. Some say the opposite, that the new ones are possible, and the old ones, even if they ripped, they're around for so long, it must be the ore is good and a good quality. Tov lachos shtei svaros came nearly. There must say that you should be machmir for both of the svaros. And the Mishnah Berurah says that l'chadchila you should be machmir for both svaros. Achal makom she'efshar limso tefillin acher v'lachos tefillin litfor elu yesh l'smoch al makilim b'spsikas hatfiros. He says you could be makel, but the eved to rely, I guess, either if they're chadashim or yishanim, as long as it's not three stitches that are broken, only two, even if they're next to each other, then it's okay. Now we get to the straps. The straps we didn't talk about in Siman Lamed Beis. The straps, right? They have to be also from a kosher animal. They have to be tanned lishma with a Jew, properly with a Jew. According to the Rush, he says maybe you can have the Jew Omid al Gabo stand behind the guy and tell him to do it l'shem tefillin. But tuas beim or beim miklaf ksheros. It doesn't have to be the klaf, right? Which we mentioned is the top grain leather, the full grain leather. Any or even dochsustos, I guess, would be good for tuas in the inner part, the split grain. They should be black. That's what it says in the Gemara. On the outside. The underside could be any color you want except red. Maybe you'll say that the ore, it was bleeding inside the animal, and therefore the black is really not black. On the other side, it was just red that became darkened. Red eventually, when it dries, it becomes blackened. So they'll think it's blood, and it's not really black, and it has to be black. Mishnah Berurah does bring an opinion that, according to the Rambam, he's supposed to, even on the underside, supposed to be black also. You see nowadays a lot of people are machmir the color, both sides of the ritual is black, but you don't have to do that. Even the Chachila, according to Mishnah Berurah, if you want a nice chumrah, like the Rambam, you could do that. Shulchan Aruch paskins that even though there's halacha l'shasina, you're supposed to do the shchorim, the retzuos, you don't need to do it l'shma. Right? Just because it has to be black doesn't mean it has to be done l'shma. L'shem it's a tefillin. But even the Shulchan Aruch would admit it's better that Yisrael does it l'shma. But you don't have to. Hagam but the evet kasher mishkar abatim aval retzuos afilu b'di'evet pasal. The Rama argues on the Shulchan Aruch, and he says no, really the retzuos. Since there's halacha l'shasina, they have to be black. They also have to be done l'shma, and therefore it's possible if it's done by a non-Jew, it doesn't do it l'shma. According, again, it would be subject to machlos in the Rambam and the Rush. The Rambam says you never have a non-Jew do it, even if it's Omen al Gaba. But the Rush says if it's Omen al Gaba and he's misayeh a little bit, then it would be okay. But everyone agrees the best thing to do is to have the retzuah done l'shma also, and also blackened, obviously. Hey, in nifsaka retzuah, let's say the strap broke. Yesh matirim litfor misad pim. Some say you could actually stitch it together, right? No one says you could actually, you can't tie it. You can't take a string and tie it, but you could stitch it with the same stitch. You're supposed to use sinew of an animal. Also etzba shalosh krichos v'yikshar elam takana lebekshir lebetfira chol yisrael orach shu b'shvil shekorach haritzua kama pam tzav v'zroa v'shal rosh mashatoli v'menu and tvira rakshira postim ba. So some say that you have to be careful. You can't do tvira to the essential parts of the ritzuos. For example, around the shal rosh, right? Whatever tightens it around your head, that's the ikr thing by the shel rosh. What hangs down is not the ikr thing over there. And therefore, that you have to make sure that it doesn't have a rip. Even if you do tefirah, it wouldn't help. And similarly with the shel yad, you have to have enough ritzua to wrap it around, tighten it around your arm, your bicep, and enough length that it would go and straight and be able to wrap it around your finger 3 times. That's the essential length of the ritzuos. That you can't do tefirah on at all. Everything else is not a problem. That's just extra. You can do tefirah on that. The Shulchan Aruch says yesh smoke al matirim k'dei shelo yitzbat al mitzvahs tefillin. Shas hadchak, you have no other way of doing it. You could even do tefirah on those essential part of the ritzuos. But the chadchila obviously is better not to do tefirah on those things. But the Evan you could do tefirah even on the essential part of the ritzuos. That would be the halacha. That would be Siman Lamed Gimel for you today. Stay tuned for Ian Shulchan Aruch. We're going to talk about why there's a difference in the ritzuos and the dio. The ink have to be black, but the batim don't have to be black. The Evan. See you there. Bye.